Welcome back. I'm Devi and this is Yin Yoga for the hips. This is an all levels class and it's beginner friendly. You can sit like this in Seiza, you can sit cross legs if that's better for you, any sitting position where you can have your spine tall and feel relatively comfortable with your spine tall. So 2 minutes closing the eyes. And letting any movement that needs to happen, any excess energy that might be kind of keeping you from being able to be soft and still, just any last wiggles that you need to make to adjust your position so that you can come into a place of stillness and then start to turn your attention inward to your breath. And establishing now a steady and even breath. So you want the speed or the velocity of the inhale to match the speed of the exhale. If possible, breathing through the nose. And beginning to direct this breath into the column of your spine. Sensing the energy of the spine, in front of the spine, in back of the spine, the right side and the left side of the spine. And see if you can imagine that you're breathing space into this column of the spine. Front of the spine, breathing space, back of the spine, and either side of the spine, breathing space into it. For 3 more deep and long breaths. Good, and now bringing the palms together in front of your heart and chanting Om 3 times, starting with an exhale. And now inhale. Om. Releasing your hands and letting the eyes gently open and coming into our first stretch, which is for the inner thighs, the groin, and 2 choices I will give you for a 3-minute stretch. First one is butterfly pose, coming forward over the legs, and of course you can sit on a lift of a folded blanket or a pillow or 2. And second choice is frog, which is anything from this kind of a wide knee child's pose coming forward to widening out the feet and bringing the hips forward. And as I adjust in my frog, I make these choices by how much I feel it in my inner thighs. So if bringing my hips back toward my feet gives me a better stretch there, then that's how I'll do the pose. If having the hips more like at the knee level makes a better groin stretch, then that's where I'll be, or anywhere in between. Your choice. And there's always the wall versions of these. If you're familiar with the dragonfly pose, you can take that one instead. And this is a pretty enjoyable pose for a lot of people, this butterfly pose. And if you're choosing this option, just make sure that it does give you a stretch here. Not everyone gets the inner groin stretch. Some people, it's mostly a forward bend, which is not a bad thing, but today we are focusing on the hips. So we're working functionally, and if you don't feel the inner groin stretch here, then go ahead and choose the other one, the frog pose. So in this journey of hip stretching today, we're going to move into all of the 5 target areas of the hips. And so we kind of make this journey around this, starting with the inside, and then we'll go all the way around the hips. If you are taking this frog pose, you have a number of options of what to do with the arms and the upper body. So you can be up on the elbows, you could even be up here with straight arms, or you can be all the way down. Or a lot of people like to rest on a bolster. A sofa cushion works if you don't have a yoga bolster. And now softening into whatever pose you're in, noticing the level of sensation in your inner thighs, your inner groin, knowing that we're here for another minute and a half, and seeing how much you can soften into what you're feeling. And slowly releasing, making your way onto your back from whichever pose you're in. Close the eyes, take 1 minute to rest, feeling the effects of your butterfly or frog pose. You can let your arms and legs spread out as much as you'd like to here. We're going to be resting after most of the postures that we do, taking this time as maybe even more important than the actual time in the pose, to really feel this release or flow of energy that can be stimulated by the pose. So maybe you feel sensation in your inner thighs that were just stretched, maybe elsewhere in the body as this energy or this chi flows through the meridians. Good, and now bending your knees, hug them into your chest. Wrap your arms around your legs and lift your head up toward your knees, and then bring your head back down and roll over to come back onto your belly and into some version of a sleeping swan or deer pose. So sleeping swan pose is with our right knee forward, turning the shin and settling back. And we're gonna do the figure 4 later as a separate pose. So today I'm gonna encourage you, if you're someone who usually avoids this pose, to try some variations. if you can't find anything that works or avoids the knee pain that's so common in this pose, then go ahead and take the figure 4. But for the moment, if you are working with knee pain, try sitting on the opposite hip. I'm going to turn around so it's easier to see. Try sitting over onto your right hip, bending the back knee. And this is a variation called the deer pose that can work for a lot of people. If you come down, you might be coming directly over your knee or inside the knee or outside of it. And anything you want to do with this back leg is really kind of fine. You can use it, basically you're using that back leg to change the position of your pelvis, the rotation of your pelvis here. And so when I square my pelvis, it looks more like the traditional kind of pigeon pigeon pose. And then if I start to skew it around, I can call it a deer pose, but it's really all the same pose. And the target area is the glutes on the right side. So this is the right buttock. Three minutes on each side. And so even if you have not been able to find something, even with this variation of the deer, then go ahead and come onto your back and take this figure 4 pose, right ankle over the left knee, and then threading this right arm through the legs to hold the back of the thigh. And some other ways in the sleeping swan pose to play around with your sensations and your angles are to lift the torso or take the torso to the left or to the right. These are all ways to adjust the position of your spine in relation to your hips and pelvis to get the sensation that you want. And some people rest all the way down on the head like so, or have a block underneath the head. Or some people just stay up here on the elbows, or like I said, even higher up on straight arms. So as we practice Yin Yoga for the hips, I give a lot of options. And it may be more options than you're used to getting in Hatha yoga classes or vinyasa flow or other classes where you don't hold the postures for this long. And so the reason is I want to make sure, I'm responsible for making sure as a Yin Yoga teacher that nobody is spending these long times of 3 to 5 minutes in agony or doing something that feels unproductive. And so I really am passionate about making sure that you find a sense of your own intuition, intuiting your own stretch rather than me telling you angles, exactly how a pose should look. I want you to know how it should feel and give you a lot of options for how to get that sensation here again in the outer hip on the right side. So let's try it on the other side now, coming up. And you can take it through hands and knees, or you can lift your hips up into a downward dog if you like. And taking it to the other side, left knee forward, right leg back. And as you come forward, other options are to play around with the position of this front knee toward the midline more or toward the outside more. And then there's always this option, this foot here is like a lever that can be down by the hip, and that's less external rotation. This is more external rotation. So people who are pretty open in this range of motion might like this more, and people who are more limited or more prone to knee pain might like having the knee farther back. Remembering your option to bend all the way over or lean all the way over onto the back hip and bend the back leg and take a deer pose, coming down at whatever angle your body likes. So remembering your target area as you explore. If you're still exploring, it's the left buttock that you want to feel the stretch in. And we all have very unique, very individual hips, individual hip bones, different ways that our femur bone, our big thigh bone, fits in with the pelvis. And that's why we all need to find our own ways into these poses. When we do a faster class where we don't stay in the poses too long, we're just there for 30 seconds or maybe a minute at the most, we can kind of tolerate these little discomforts that happen when we're not really truly honoring our body's anatomy. But when we are in these poses for a longer time, we really do need to come into a deeper sense of understanding what we need to do differently in our own bodies. And releasing the pose, coming back, taking a downward dog or a few cat and cows if you want to stay on hands and knees. And then go down onto the knees and flip over onto your back for another 1 minute rest. And this outer line that's stimulated by the last posture, the glutes, it also runs through the side bodies. This is your gallbladder channel, side of the torso, sides of the face. You might feel sensations along this channel, or it might spread or disperse elsewhere. And bend your knees. Hug them into the chest, please. And roll onto one side to come up. We're going to make our way into half saddle pose. And half saddle pose is, I'll show you some alternatives, but first I'll just show you the posture without any modification. So I've got my right foot back, folded back against my right hip, and I'm leaning back with the idea of stretching into the front of this right thigh. And this is not going to work for everyone's knee, so you know who you are if you try it and it's not working. So a wonderful way to modify this is to come onto your side, left elbow on the ground, and you're on your left hip, and then bend your right foot up and hold the foot in the hand. And you can stay here or rest down on your arm or on a pillow. And if you are not able to reach this foot comfortably, then you have something like a strap, a belt, or whatever's available to have around that foot. And then anywhere from there to here, if you want to do a version of the half saddle where you're not all the way on your back but kind of bent back, or have a pillow under your back, all these are ways to modify to get into this right thigh, right quadriceps region. So let's go for 3 minutes in some version of this. And it's important to find a different variation if you're experiencing knee pain, and that is true for every one of the postures that we do in today's hip sequence. Knee pain is not part of what we're going for. You might feel some sensation in your knee as the tissues of the quads, they're connected down to the tissues of the knee. So kind of a long, broad sensation of stretch is generally considered good, but if it's a pointed sensation that's more painful, and especially if it's on the inside or the outside of the knee, then that's something to be very cautious about and find a different variation. Ways to play around with this: if you're comfortable on your back, you can play around with bending the left knee, having the foot flat, or taking the leg in like so, or opening the knee out to the side. And slowly release the pose. So you can untuck the foot, or you can roll away from the bent leg. and then come into it on the second side. So maybe you're bending your left foot back and lying back easily. And I didn't mention on the first side, but you always have the option to lie back over a bolster, pillows, a sofa cushion, or what have you. Or if you're starting out here on the holding the foot variation, you're on your right elbow holding the foot, and then maybe staying right here, maybe bringing the torso down, maybe starting to drop it back. You can bend this right knee up or not. If you're more flat on your back here, you can still bend the right knee straight up or out to the side. And this leg is really like a lever. So in Yin, it's really good to begin to think about all your limbs as levers. And this right leg, whatever it does, is changing the angles and orientation of the pelvis, which is then in turn going to change the stretch you're feeling in your knee. So when you rotate it out to the side, you're actually making it less intense here. When you bring it more straight up, you're kind of anchoring the pelvis, which is probably going to make it more intense here in the left quads. And when you bring it in, that's going to do even more of that. And so if you want to decrease the angle, make it less intense, you start to, again, come up more to this side version. Finding whatever pose feels doable and sustainable for you, resting there. Settling into a steady and easy breath. This is the range of motion, this getting into the quads and the hip flexors, that when I've taught my bigger group classes, there's a lot of collective resistance to stretching into this range of motion. And why is that? I don't really know. It's because it's a tough range of motion. It's like in regular life, we don't tend to stretch this very much. We have to intentionally get into this area. And if we ignore it, if we neglect this range of motion, then we have repercussions of the lower back getting locked up, of the pelvis getting tucked in a posterior tilt and getting stuck there, and the lower back taking the extra strain. And in general, the center of gravity of the body getting off kilter, which can have repercussions all the way up the spine into the neck and shoulders. Breathing a few more nice, long and deep and easy breaths here. And releasing. So again, you can roll away from that bent foot to get it out, and then just come onto your back for a 1-minute rest, closing the eyes. The channel stimulated in that last posture is the stomach and spleen meridian in the front of the body, particularly the stomach meridian. Bending the knees, drawing them in. With one hand on each knee now, just circle the knees. Easy in one direction and then in the other direction. So one circle clockwise and then one circle counterclockwise. A couple more times. Good, and now roll over onto one side and make your way up to sit. Take your left leg in front, right leg bent, half butterfly pose. Sit up on the lift of a folded blanket or a pillow if you wish. And come forward over this left leg or slightly to the inside of the leg. So we are now moving to the back of the leg. We did the inside, the outside, the front, and now we're in the back of the thigh, the hamstrings. And this is sometimes not considered a hip pose. When people think about the hips, they don't tend to picture this pose or the hamstrings. However, the hamstrings are very much part of the hips. The hip joint is the place where the leg connects to the pelvis, right? And so the hamstrings are kind of important in that equation. And I recently did a whole class on, not a whole class, but a good portion of a class on half butterfly pose. In short, the options here are a lot the same as what we were talking about in Sleeping Swan. The torso can veer right, it can go straight over the leg, it can veer left. The back leg can go farther back, farther forward. And there's also a question sometimes of this, whether it's important to reach the foot. And the answer is no. It is really not important to reach the foot. Now, sometimes if you can reach the foot, you can get some leverage that feels good. However, for a lot of people, that's more of a yang thing, to be pulling, and more yin yoga is to let gravity do the work rather than having to do any muscular engagement. So what would be preferable for a more yin-like practice, if you feel like you need more oomph, like you're not getting enough stretch, is to lift yourself up on a folded blanket or a pillow or a couple pillows as much as you need to get the weight of your torso working in your favor. And then you can just rest your arms, hands on the shin, the floor. For some people, resting them on the foot, it feels restful. For me, my arms are kind of on the short side, and this is not really restful for me, even though I can do it. I usually choose to have the hands farther back. And if you're higher up here, you might just need your hands for your stability. And for some people, bending the knee helps the pose be more doable, as long as it doesn't take the stretch out of the back of your thigh. Then bending the knee is a fine option, and sometimes even propping a pillow or a rolled towel or something under the leg can be helpful. And slowly now releasing to come up, changing sides, right leg forward, left leg bent and coming over your leg. Any propping that you want to do, of course, same thing. And as you find stillness, notice the rhythm of the breath. And let the steadiness and smoothness of your breath help you to stay in a still place in the pose. And bring the mind in, focusing your awareness inward and feeling what's happening inside of your body, feeling the back of your thigh. Noticing any other sensations that are happening. And slowly releasing half butterfly, make your way down onto your back to rest for another full minute of stillness. And bend your knees and hug them in and wrap the arms around the legs or hold on to the knees and rock side to side. Massaging the lower back after that wonderful half butterfly pose. And roll over to one side, please, coming up to hands and knees for dragon pose. So when we did the half saddle, this was for the quads. We're kind of continuing when we do dragon pose on the same channel, left leg forward. This is more for the hip flexors. So quads and hip flexors are similar but different regions of our hips. And the hands can be here on the inside of the leg, or you can be down on your elbows, or you can have your hands on either side of the leg or on top of blocks. 3 minutes, you can choose your variation. And when we continue on this thread of the legs just being levers for what's happening more in the core, then we can play around with whether the hips are more tilted to the side or more squared, or even more toward the opposite side, which is less common, I think, just because it's kind of hard to hold that, but that might be what floats your boat. And so you do your best in this pose to find some stillness and to find a place where the mind can relax. Even though you're being asked to be a bit more active in dragon pose. You have to kind of hold yourself up. You have to kind of balance yourself. Your arms are active. So within that, within this mix of yin and yang, more yang for the upper body, yin for the lower body, see if you can find the softness, directing it to the hip, right hip flexors, psoas. And releasing the pose, and downward dog or some cat and cows, taking just a few moments before you move to the second side. And so taking now the knees to the ground, the right leg forward. And the front leg can also act as a lever here. The knee opening out to the side, or the foot stepping farther out to the side or closer in. So there's so many choices, and yoga people like to give every little variation a name. So there's, if you want to give everything we do here a name, you can, but it's all dragon pose. Down on the elbows or coming upright. And the goal, again, is hip flexors on the left side. And slowly now releasing, making your way onto your back once again, 1 minute of rest. Bending the knees and beginning to transition into our last outer hip stretch. So this will be your choice of figure 4, right ankle over the left knee, clasping behind the left thigh, or for some people in front of the shin, or we're gonna come upright to sit for square or shoelace pose. And I'll offer some variations today of this is shoelace, right knee over the left, and this is square. And if you normally avoid these poses, you might be able to find something if you play around with this variation called the, what's this called? The untied shoelace, where really we just see what angle of the legs here feels good and gives this stretch in the right glutes. And if you can't find anything there that doesn't cause knee pain, then you can stay on the back and do that figure 4 instead. So shoelace, coming forward with knees on top of each other, or square, or one of the untied in between those two variations. So pretty much every class that I teach on the hips, I hear from somebody who was in the class later that I have trouble getting into that pose. I have trouble getting into this pose. What are the variations I can do to get into that pose or this pose? And so in this pose and in the other hip poses we've done, I've given you several variations. And so hopefully there's something you can find, but just know if you aren't finding a variation that works for you, it's not uncommon and you're not alone. And just listening to your body, and if you feel like spending time in a posture is not doing anything for you, then listen to that. You can skip it, or you can just keep on experimenting, or just do a different pose that you like better, knowing that it's really about getting into your own body, healing and stretching your own body, and it's not about doing a pose. And slowly releasing and coming into the second side. So you're maybe staying on your back and doing that figure 4, or maybe doing the shoelace or the square. And sitting up on a blanket, folded blanket or pillows is an option here as well. So now our target area is changing to the other side, left glutes, left buttock. And some people like to do different angles here as well, and it's Similar to what we talked about in Sleeping Swan, you don't have to be going directly straight ahead if you get a better sensation going one way or the other. And slowly releasing your pose and making your way onto your back. Final Shavasana, closing the eyes when you get there and making any final adjustments. If you need to put on any extra layers or a blanket to keep yourself warm, please do. Maybe something to cover your eyes, or maybe a bolster or pillow under your knees. And once you have found yourself in a place of stillness, take an inhaling breath, and with a sigh, a nice big exhale. And another one like that, inhaling, letting the earth receive your weight as you sigh it out. One last time, inhaling. Feeling everything that's happening inside as a result of this practice, stretching and stimulating all of the energy channels, all of the major energy channels of the legs with this hip practice. Legs and hips, lower body. Feeling the energy radiating around and within the pelvic bowl, the low belly, the lower back, the sacrum, and the place where the legs connect to the torso. Breathing down into this whole region, breathing light, breathing space. taking a deeper breath into your belly and into your heart. And exhaling, and begin to wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes and stretch out into your arms and stretch out into your legs. And bend your knees and roll over onto one side. And come up into a comfortable seat. Using a prop under your seat if you'd like. As you come upright with your spine, any comfortable sitting position. Taking 3 long breaths here. Noticing how the body feels. Noticing how the breath feels. And now 3 ohms, just like those 3 breaths. So easy, centered with your next inhale. Om. 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 That's our practice. Namaste. I hope you enjoyed this practice, and if you did, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel, and check out my other yoga videos. And if you felt anything in this practice that you think is going to help you through your day, let me know about it. Put it in the comments below, or of course let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you next time.